been doing this too long, but I started out at the University of Birmingham City University about 7 or so years ago, and I've recently moved over to University of Birmingham probably about 8 months ago to help them out with their BIM journey. Wouldn't say that they're at sort of ground zero. They've already made some efforts to implement BIM at the university. Matt's here from the university. I don't think he'd say the difference. So essentially well, I'll tell you what, I'll go through the presentation instead of just talking to it. But I've been at the university now for 8 months, and we've huge capital programme. I think we're getting up to about £1 million worth of capital programme over the next few years as well. So lots of BIM jobs, if you want to call them those. Everything we do is going forward being BIM to some degree, and I'll explain how that works. But I'll just move through. So BIM, what is it? If anybody can tell me the exact definition of BIM, you can have gold star, but essentially it's different for everybody. So your version of BIM will be different to somebody else's version of BIM. QS's perception of it, I mean, that's project management. You've probably seen that. It's probably about 15, 20 years old, that sketches. I remember emailing it on when I was an apprentice. But it's essentially, it is different to everybody. A client, it's different to a client, it's different to a consultant, it's different to an architect, quantity surveyor, etc., etc. So there is no exact sort of definition there. But that was all I wanted to talk about BIM in itself, so hopefully everybody knows what it is. The requirements at the university have changed. We've got bespoke documentation now. We like to work on the basis of practical delivery of information, which can then be used in operation, not jumping through hoops for other people, i.e. level 2 stuff. Not really interested in that. We're interested in delivering asset information for what the university needs to operate with. And we've got an approach which is deliverable and key, absolutely measurable. So we know what we get in and we can measure it. And if the contractor doesn't give us that at the end of the day, we can give them a kick in and make sure we do get it. It's not BIM level 2, it's not COBE, it's not Uniclass, because those things don't, in my opinion, make sense. So what are we doing? We're supporting our sort of overall estate strategy, and the BIM strategy is that we will aim to be the best. Who wouldn't want to be the best at doing what they're doing? So we've got to always aim there. Whether we achieve it or not is another matter, but we've got to aim there. We do BIM, and by that I mean everybody in estates does it. It's not just something that my team do. So we've got our operations guys. They will eventually, not quite yet, but they will eventually be doing BIM as well. So essentially, we're talking about building information modelling. They will be using the information, they'll be changing the information, and that is the information modelling part of it. We're looking for a consistent level of BIM across the university, so all of our capital projects are delivering now pretty much to the same requirements. I jumped into the university 8 months ago in the midst of a load of capital programmes where we have tried our best to change the outcomes of those so that we're getting consistency. There's a lot of projects, and not all of them were delivering the same outcomes anyway. They've kind of got, in its sort of bluntest form, watered down versions of the same requirements. So essentially it's not the same requirement when you get it out the other end. The information that we need against a boiler on a capital project that costs us £50 million is the same information we need on a boiler that's going to cost us £1 million to deliver. The boilers still need to be operated the same way, so we still need that same information, so we're looking to get that consistency. And of course we then deliver it into operation. At the moment we're looking at a very crude way to get the information into Plan On, but our future aspirations are to connect the BIM environment with the CAFM environment as well. which we've got. I think we've scared our capital provider with our sort of aspiration to do that. So we'll see. We'll see where that ends up. Right. Where does BIM apply then? So, as I said, it applies on our new builds, it applies on our refurbishments, it applies into operations and maintenance and management. It will apply everywhere. The asset information, if you like, and the way that we're getting everybody involved in this is almost doing BIM by stealth, where we're developing the asset information up in the models and then we're representing that in the operational systems. In theory, you could do that without anybody in operations knowing that you're doing BIM. But what you've got is an asset information that they're then able to operate with, connected back to an environment for 3D, for when they are mature enough to start using that information as well. But the key is that we still need to maintain both together. Otherwise, we will end up with the situation we've always been in, where we've had to resurvey everything each time we need to know what's going on in that building. Why are we doing it? As I said, we're doing it for us. It's ours. It's our precious. So essentially, we're not doing it for any other reason other than so we can manage our estate better, operate our estate, use that data then into the rest of the university. We're not doing it to jump through anybody else's hoops. So we are supporting the operations. We've got aligned asset information structures. We're using the NRM, similar to what Ellie presented on at BCU. The NRM has very good links with the SFG20, the SFG20 being the maintenance schedules that are typically used within our industry anyway. So we then have asset information linked to SFG20 that we can then move model information, asset information from models and have them connected into our CAFIB environment working alongside the SFG20. Essentially, the scheme that we've developed is to only really deliver the information that we need to operate. No more, no less. We do more, we're going to pay for it. We do less, we're not going to be able to use the information correctly. So what's different to sort of the level 2 stuff really is the way that we've developed our information matrix. So I'll go into a bit more detail, but we've got asset information requirements overlaid over the categorisation using the new rules of measurement categorisation, and then we've got our parameters down the side, and we do a sort of really strict mapping between the two. The level of graphics, so LOG and LOI. LOG is level of graphics in our terminology, LOI level of information. We've kind of tried to move away from the LOD because I think within the government level 2 there's about 6 different definitions of what LOD is. So it's really confusing when you're trying to write it into documentation. So level of graphics, essentially what our document says, keep it lean so that we've just got an object placeholder. That chair, for example, way too detailed. That's in a medical school model that we've got that's been delivered by our architects, presumably a manufacturer perhaps has developed the model, passed it over to the architect to use in their models. If you put 2,000 of them into a model, you then start to ride to a halt. So really the sort of level of graphics needs to be vastly reduced in particular objects just to make them easy to use. That's what we're interested in, because when we then flip that model over into operations, we're not sitting there watching that little wheel spin round, getting that buffer face. You know, when really we just want to be doing our job. So we've got level of graphics there, level of information. The information is all put against the models so that we can then transfer that out into any of the systems that we need to use it for. A bit of a zoomed in version. Essentially, we've got the NRM classification. There are 5 to 6 levels of classification. So it's things like superstructure, substructure, FF&E services, and they then break down into these sort of very sensible, very understandable classifications, not like unit class, which doesn't make any sense to I think anybody. but the tree works. The tree works in NRM, which makes it understandable from a BIM point of view and into our operational teams as well as our consultants. They can all understand what a door is. They can all understand what a wall is. We've then mapped against the assets, the particular pieces of information that we need. That becomes an absolute then, and an absolute eventuality that we can use across all projects. We've got, behind that, there is a maintainable assets list as well, which restricts it even further. So I say we're only asking for information against the maintainable assets that we need information against, and we're only asking for bits of information that we need to operate. Reducing the amount of information we need, which should reduce the effort taken to deliver it to us. So, what differences have we got? We've got our own in-house team, which is very important. I know a lot of other universities don't necessarily have the teams internally. Many clients don't have their own internal teams, and they sort of perhaps use BIM consultants to help guide through what they need. It really does need an in-house team, somebody with a vested interest in actually delivering this information for the organisation. We use the NRM structure. We've got our own bespoke information requirements. We are planning to deliver asset information into models. Since I started at the university, we've probably finished three main projects: brain health, data centre, and our old gym. Two of which have been delivered pretty much against the requirements in that time. So we were able to convince the contractor to convert the requirements from the original requirements to our new requirements. Funnily enough, that contractor was Robert Dixon, so Chris and his team were doing it. The one that brain health one was a project that we were able to convince most of the consultants to deliver the information to us, but the main contractor wasn't necessarily bought into delivering that information. So there's a little bit of work that we're going to need to do to make sure that model meets our requirements going forwards. And we've got a whole host of other projects and models which don't meet the requirements that we're going to have to work out bringing the information across. But that will then give us the foundation of our consistent approach across all our projects. All of the rest of the capital projects that we're working on currently all are now aligned pretty much to the new requirements. As a minimum, the asset information requirements. There are other requirements within the document to do with laser scanning, clash detection, etc., etc. But the core requirement about asset information and models being validated are being delivered through these projects. As an organisation, we are specifying what software needs to be used on our projects, mostly because we can. I don't want to be paying for additional licences for Bentley, Tegla, all these that are ArchiCAD. We have Revit, we know how to use Revit, so why would I want anything different? We don't need to worry about the IFCs because which are broken, but essentially the models are delivered in the native form that we are asking for anyway, so we can use those models and transfer that information in. When we're developing plugins for Revit, for example, if we do that, we're only going to need to do that in one environment and not all the rest, which will make it a lot easier for us. A little bit of resistance from some people in the industry, but essentially, if we relaxed on that, we would end up with models from all sorts of different software packages that we just wouldn't be able to use. Right. This is the main bit that I was going to talk about. These are the problems. So, have we got any consultants in the room? I think Chris is. Okay.
Go on, we're okay, we're robust.
I was going to say, if you're easily offended, I suggest you go. Have we got any contractors in the room? Excellent. Chris has left because he knows what's coming. So basically, I just wanted to talk a little bit about and sort of educate some of the clients in the room about some of the problems we faced in moving from, in some cases, no BIM to BIM and the old requirements to the new BIM. Some of the problems we faced and how we kind of are dealing with them. So yeah, that part I'll just go through the first slide, which is to do with consultants. Apparently Revit doesn't do civil engineering, which is not true. Before I joined the university, I was doing civil engineering, believe it or not, with BIM. You can model manholes, you can model pipes below ground. This is the kind of our core infrastructure. It can be done. I do not understand why on a lot of our projects there was a sort of BIM was done above ground and everything below ground in the landscape wasn't covered. Even though we were paying for it to be designed, it just wasn't covered. And there was no good reason for it, it just wasn't done and it just wasn't talked about. So on a couple of our jobs we've had a cost increase because we said, well actually we need our Revit model to be a landscape, we need our landscape to be, I'll do the first one first, civil engineering. We need our drainage to be done in Revit, so go away, give me a price, we've got to do it. We've got to build a campus-wide infrastructure model. That is squarely in my charge from our director, because I look after the CAD team and the BIM team. So the drawn records are my thing to sort out. So there's no excuses for any of the jobs not delivering civil engineering. Similarly with landscape, they both feed into this sort of context external model. We are building a campus-wide Revit model, which has all below ground services, landscape and civil. So any of the new projects need to include that, otherwise we're going to pay extra some of the time. I'll talk a little bit about the extra payments later. So we get consultants telling us that our BIM standards dictate our drawing and naming conventions. Really? We're paying you to do a job. We need our information presented back to us in a way that we understand it. That's what we pay for. So if we tell you to do it a different way, do it a different way. Do it the way that we need it. Because otherwise our CDE will not work. There's no point using, for example, a consultant's project number at the start of a naming convention if we need it to be ours, because the number they've got will be a different project to us. And that doesn't make any sense. So we need to make sure that those things happen. These are the things you've got to look for when you're talking about BIM with your consultants. Clash detection is an extra activity. No, it's not. Clash detection is just a subset of doing design coordination. We've already paid you to do design coordination. I don't want to pay for clash detection because it's your responsibility, it's your risk. So we talk about following proper processes in our BIM requirements. We don't have an EIR, we've got a BIM requirements document set out differently. So we talk about clash detection, but what we're trying to do is get our consultants to think the right way, to make sure that they are delivering coordinated models. But often we'll just get a cost back to do it. So actually more recently we've been going back to our supply chain and said, well actually, I'll tell you what, don't do clash detection, just give us a coordinated model at the end. And then all of a sudden that cost drops off. Saved ourselves loads of money and still get the same output. And then there's another one there, so about the MEP design model being used by the contractor. I think I've seen over the years some brave decisions being made and some really stupid ones, where you've had a contractor decide to say, right, we're going to use this model, and then 6 months later they decide that it's no good to use. So there's a real big waste of money and time. Actually, they need to make a brave decision when they're doing the handover. Are we going to use this or not? If we're not going to use it, build our own, great, start again, redesign it, which most M&E contractors will want to do. But equally, if you take on the M&E consultants model, do it and make sure it follows through all the way. Don't try ditching it halfway through and not buying into it. So the M&E contractors really do need to understand what is being modelled by the design consultant. Chris actually talked earlier about sort of voids and zones, and I think there's a really nice principle about it. Sort of our M&E consultants not even drawing the pipes and the ducts, just defining the zones where things will go, and then the M&E contractor could come along and just use those zones and those zones have been so well coordinated that they will not clash if they stay within that area. So there's some principles that the industry needs to learn. But yeah, so it's a question that they often ask because they seem to think they're wasting their time because the contractor's going to carry on doing it, but they're not. Contractors, bane of my life. That top comment came through to us recently. It was meant as a criticism. I can't take that as a criticism. They are the most prescriptive documents in the industry. Okay? That means we know exactly what we're going to get. That's why they're so prescriptive. Because I need to know exactly what's going to come out of the back end of the project. And I need to know that every project will come out the same. So I have my assets in the same structure each time on every project. Barcoding. Data like barcoding is highly unusual, time-consuming, and unnecessary. Oh, by the way, none of these came from Will Muddick. I can't understand how a consultant or sort of contractor can come back and tell a client who's actually going to use these models that, how do they know it's not, not required, not necessary? It's crazy that contractors will come back like that. If you want that information, you need it for your operations. Don't allow a contractor to come back and tell you that it's not needed when you know it is. If software is not used where I put software, there's a specific software in there, is not used post handover, then the barcode links will not be valid. Therefore, we assume this is to be left blank. No, we're not going to use that software. We want the barcode information applied to the model. Now that happens in lots of different instances, not just barcodes, where the contractor might assume that it's not necessary to put that information into the model, and it absolutely is. But the good thing is with our approach is we can absolutely measure it and nail them if they have not provided it. We don't author models. Contractors don't author models. That comment is around not being able to provide as-built information into those models. A lot of consultants now will only provide last issue for construction, which is, from our point of view, BS, because we're still paying the contractor to give us as-built. So, consultant delivers to last issue for construction. There is nothing stopping the contractor taking the model, filling it with information. They have the tools to do it. Or just employ the consultant to put the information in that they're telling them to, removing all liability for the data because they're just literally pushing the data in. So there's certain things that contractors like to try and pull the wool over your eyes on. Right, contractor X will not be undertaking any laser scanning. Our checks and measures for survey checking is explained in the BEP. The explanation in the BEP is we do manual spot checks. What we're asking for is an accurate model. Our requirements specify an accuracy to within about 50 mil. This particular table was part of the document pre our new requirements, but it still specifically said that certain things will be checked to a tolerance. 50 mil, 40 mil, 30 mil, 10 mil, 100 mil. How are you going to check those things by just walking around and looking at it? You can't. And this goes on to the conversation that Chris was talking about earlier about validating models. It was, myself and Peter had asked Chris Kinman about validation of models. We as a university, there's little value in us completing models if there's no integrity to the model, no validation process being completed. If we're specifying that these things are going to be to within 10 mil or 50 mil, then make sure they are. The only way to do it is to laser scan it. I do not know any other approach that will give you the accuracy that laser. Did I press that? will give you the accuracy. So if we ask for it, we're going to do it. You've proved to us that you can do that. You can't do that with managed projects. But we get it time and time again, various different techniques. So Matterport scans is a little wand that companies use that can get sort of measurements to within like 30 mil or something like that. It's not as accurate as a traditional tripod laser scan. Complete job. Chris's team actually do a really good job as they're constructing and dropping into a room as it sort of one trade finishes, drop into a room, scan it, take that model, put it against take the laser scan, put it against the model and check it. All of these things will actually mean that they ultimately get a very accurate model at the end, which is what we're employing them to do. So don't let contractors and consultants dictate what you do, what you want out of the model. You're the guys that need to operate it. You need to use these models and take them forwards. If you're not going to take the models through into operation, there may be little point doing it. So you can save yourself a huge load of cost and headache by not doing this at all. But I think most organisations, certainly universities, will want to take this information through into operation, take it through into the CAFMs. CAFM systems at the minute probably don't quite do it, but there are some very good CDEs that will take the information through at the moment from the native model platforms. Your project teams need to be open. Now you might think that at the University of Birmingham we have a very closed approach to BIM. You're absolutely right, we do, because it's got to be precise. By project teams being open, what I'm saying is that they need to be open to working the way that we want them to. Okay? So if a consultant comes along and says, well, I can only use ArchiCAD, and you should be using ArchiCAD to do the architecture, not being closed and saying Revit, actually, they need to be open and just come and use the software that we want them to use, not the other way around. And yes, we do need accurate models, so we need to make sure that they are validated. The information is validated. The asset information scheme behind the models that we're delivering is fairly robust. It can be measured. Unfortunately, most contractors and consultants don't like it, but there are a lot of consultants that do like it because they know exactly what they've got to deliver. I just wanted to talk about this. This is a concept that as sort of owner-operators, you'll probably want to take away, and hopefully the animations work really well on this. So this is about what I'm talking about. I know a lot of you will probably have estates, capital projects going on at the moment, and you may be thinking about moving from either a traditional project to, well, from a traditional design and build project that's been done in 2D with no sort of BIM requirements to a project now that you want to apply BIM to. So what we're saying is, there's your cost for that. The traditional project, you're just asking a consultant to design your building, coordinate it, and then it ultimately will get passed over for delivery and being built. If you ask for BIM, that's what you'll get. You'll just get slapped on top, bolted on, extra cost for BIM, without any consideration for the duplication of work that happens between the two. So what needs to happen is you need to consider how the two overlap, because otherwise you will be paying for two lots of certain activities. They'll only complete one, but they'll still get paid for the two in their cost. So you need to consider how the two overlap. So for example, we are paying for a design coordination job, and then they'll do the drawings and then deliver it. Now if we're saying actually we want BIM now, they're going to do it in models, and they're going to do some clash detection and coordination in that respect. Well, actually, the design coordination piece you've already paid for, essentially, and the drawing work is another cost that can be supplemented against the modelling side. So you're not necessarily having to pay for the same thing twice. That's where you get the delta. That's the difference between the two. You've got to consider as owner-operators how you make sure that you're not paying too much, or if at all, any for that delta. Because then the rest of it is just the value that you get out of doing BIM, otherwise you wouldn't do it in the first place. So you need to make sure that you are getting value over and above just doing a traditional project. And that's me completed. I don't think I've got any more slides. Got any questions?